It was a quiet, foggy night at the old gas station on Route 66. Sam, the lone attendant, had worked the graveyard shift for years. The small, weathered building and its ancient pumps had seen better days, but it was a job, and it kept the bills paid. At precisely 12 a.m., Sam's routine was disrupted by the arrival of a beat-up black sedan. It rolled into the station slowly, almost as if it were gliding over the cracked pavement. The car's headlights pierced through the fog, casting eerie shadows on the dilapidated sign that read, "Cash Only." The engine turned off with a groan, and the car settled into the bay with an almost unsettling silence. Sam glanced up from his magazine, his eyes narrowing as he saw the driver step out. The man was tall and shrouded in a long coat that dragged on the ground. His face was obscured by a wide-brimmed hat, and the brim cast a deep shadow over his features. Sam's curiosity was piqued, but he shrugged it off and prepared to assist the customer. "Evening," Sam called out as the man approached. The stranger didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked straight to the pump, as if he knew exactly where he was going. Sam noticed a faint, strange odor in the air, a mix of decay and something almost metallic. The man fumbled with the pump, his movements deliberate but oddly mechanical. Sam couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He decided to keep an eye on the man from the safety of the small office. The stranger filled his tank in silence. When he was done, he walked back to his car and fished out a wad of cash from his coat pocket. Sam noticed the money was old, worn, and stained with what looked like blood. His unease grew, but he took the cash and made change. As Sam handed the change to the man, he finally got a glimpse of his face. What he saw made his blood run cold. The man's face was pallid and lifeless, with hollow eyes that seemed to look right through Sam. The stranger's gaze was empty, as if he were staring into another world. "Thanks," the man said, in a voice that was too smooth, too perfect. He took the change and slid back into his car, which roared to life with a disturbing, guttural growl. The car sped off into the fog, leaving behind an unsettling silence. Sam shook his head and tried to dismiss the encounter. He was used to strange things happening on the night shift, but this felt different. He tried to return to his routine, but the fog seemed to thicken, and an oppressive feeling settled over the station. Around 3 a.m., Sam noticed something odd. The fuel gauge on the pump where the stranger had stopped was now reading as if it had been used, but the tank was full. He checked the station's security camera footage, only to find that there was no record of the car ever arriving. The timestamp on the footage showed the car appearing out of nowhere and disappearing just as abruptly. The next morning, Sam decided to investigate further. He checked with the local authorities and learned that no one had reported a missing person, nor was there any record of the strange car. It was as if the man had never existed. Days later, as Sam was closing up, he noticed a new, rusty nail on the counter. It wasn't there before. Intrigued, he turned it over and found a small, blood-stained note attached. It read, "I'm still out there." Sam never worked the night shift again. The gas station on Route 66 continued to operate, but it was never quite the same. Customers reported strange occurrences, like gas pumps malfunctioning or lights flickering erratically. The old building seemed to hold on to the eerie memory of the midnight customer who had come and gone, but whose presence lingered in the fog. The gas station at the edge of town was known for its old-fashioned charm and quirky owner, Mrs. Hargrove. She ran the station with a firm yet kind hand, and her customers adored her for her warm demeanor and homemade pies. One rainy evening, Mrs. Hargrove was closing up the station when a car skidded into the lot, the tires screeching as it came to a halt. The driver, a disheveled young man, looked frantic. His clothes were soaked, and he had a wild look in his eyes. "Help me, please," he pleaded as he stumbled out of the car. "I need to use the phone." Mrs. Hargrove noticed the man's desperation and immediately let him inside. She offered him a cup of coffee while he waited for the tow truck he claimed was on the way. As the rain battered the windows, the man's story began to unfold. He explained that he had been driving through the countryside when his car broke down. He had seen the gas station's lights from miles away and hoped to find help. Mrs. Hargrove listened sympathetically, though she noticed that the man seemed to avoid eye contact and kept glancing nervously out the window. As the minutes ticked by, the man's demeanor grew more agitated. He paced around the small convenience store, occasionally stopping to peer outside. Mrs. Hargrove tried to reassure him, but his anxiety was palpable. The tow truck arrived, and the driver entered the station, but before they could get started, the man's phone rang. He answered it with a shaky voice, and his expression changed to one of sheer terror. He hurriedly ended the call and turned to Mrs. Hargrove. "I can't stay here," he said. "I need to leave, now." Confused but concerned, Mrs. Hargrove watched as the man rushed out into the rain and jumped into his car. The tow truck driver, equally puzzled, shrugged and prepared to leave. Mrs. Hargrove returned to the store, shaking her head in worry. The next morning, the local news reported a chilling story. A car matching the man's description had been found abandoned at the edge of town. It was filled with strange markings and symbols that resembled something out of a dark ritual. The police were baffled, and the town buzzed with speculation. Mrs. Hargrove tried to put the unsettling encounter behind her, but the memory lingered. Days turned into weeks, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Her regular customers noticed her growing unease, but she dismissed their concerns with a smile. Then one night, something extraordinary happened. Mrs. Hargrove was alone at the station, cleaning up after closing, when she heard a faint tapping sound from the back room. It was a rhythmic, almost rhythmic knock, like someone was tapping on a door. She hesitated, but decided to investigate. As she walked towards the sound, the tapping grew louder and more insistent. She reached the back room and found the door ajar, though she was certain she had closed it earlier. The room was empty, save for a dusty old mirror in the corner. The mirror caught her eye, and she felt an odd pull towards it. As she approached, she noticed something chilling in the reflection. Behind her, in the mirror, was the man from that fateful night. His face was twisted in agony, his eyes wide with terror. He was mouthing words she couldn't hear but understood perfectly. "Help me." Mrs. Hargrove spun around, but the room was empty. Her heart raced as she turned back to the mirror, but the man was gone. The reflection showed only her own pale face, staring back in horror. She stumbled out of the room, her mind reeling with questions. Desperate for answers, she contacted the local authorities and shared her experience. The police investigated the station thoroughly, but found no evidence to support Mrs. Hargrove's claims. They chalked it up to stress or a vivid dream. Mrs. Hargrove was left alone with her fear, unable to convince anyone of the truth. Days later, she received a package at the station. It was an old, weathered journal with no return address. Inside, the journal was filled with cryptic entries and sketches of dark rituals. Among the pages, Mrs. Hargrove found a disturbing entry dated the night of the man's visit. "I have seen the end. I am trapped between worlds, bound by my sins. The last customer will not find peace. The darkness has claimed me, and now it seeks others." Mrs. Hargrove realized with a shiver that the man's frantic behavior and the markings on his car had been a desperate attempt to escape something far more sinister than she had imagined. The journal was a grim testament to his fate, and a warning to anyone who might stumble into the gas station's dark history. Despite her fear, Mrs. Hargrove continued to run the gas station. The place never felt quite the same. Occasionally, customers reported strange occurrences, disembodied whispers, flickering lights, and inexplicable cold spots. But for Mrs. Hargrove, the most unsettling thing was the mirror in the back room, which she never dared to clean or cover. As the years passed, the story of the last customer became a local legend. Some claimed to have seen the man's ghost wandering the streets, forever searching for a way out. The gas station, once a quaint stop on the highway, became a place of eerie whispers and shadows, a chilling reminder of the dark forces that lurk just beyond the veil of reality. Mrs. Hargrove eventually retired, and the station changed hands several times. Each new owner experienced strange events and unsettling encounters, but none could explain the inexplicable happenings that plagued the station. The place became a dark legend, a testament to the unknown horrors that had once visited its unassuming pumps and faded walls. The abandoned car, with its cryptic markings, was never found, and the man's fate remained a mystery. But those who knew the story knew one thing for sure. The gas station had become a place where the boundary between the living and the dead was dangerously thin. A place where the last customer had met his grim end, and where darkness continued to linger. In a remote corner of a desolate town, an abandoned gas station stood as a relic of a bygone era. It had been closed for years, the pumps rusted and the windows boarded up. Local legends spoke of the place being cursed, but most dismissed these as ghost stories. One evening, Jake, an urban explorer and self-proclaimed thrill-seeker, decided to investigate the old gas station. Armed with a flashlight, a camera, and a sense of adventure, he ventured into the overgrown lot. The station looked even more dilapidated up close. The once bright colors of the paint had long faded, replaced by peeling layers and encroaching mold. Jake pushed through the creaky door and stepped into the dimly lit interior. The air was stale, filled with the smell of mildew and rotting wood. He started exploring, taking pictures of the old cash register, broken pumps, and faded advertisements. As he wandered deeper into the station, he stumbled upon a hidden door behind a stack of old tires. Curiosity getting the better of him, Jake pried it open. The door led to a small, dark room with a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. On the floor was a large, dusty safe. Jake's heart raced with excitement as he approached the safe, imagining the treasures it might hold. He tugged at the rusty handle, and to his surprise, the door creaked open. Inside, instead of gold or money, Jake found a collection of disturbing photographs and old, tattered clothes. The photos were of various people, each showing a look of terror. Some were taken in the gas station itself. Jake's skin crawled as he realized that these people had been captured in their final moments. In the corner of the room was a small, makeshift altar. It was adorned with strange symbols and covered in what looked like old, dried blood. A chill ran down Jake's spine as he recognized the symbols from local folklore about a cult that was rumored to have operated in the area. Suddenly, Jake heard a noise from the main part of the station. It sounded like footsteps, but the only other person he knew of was his friend who had stayed in the car outside. Jake decided to check it out, but as he turned to leave, he noticed something even more unsettling. The safe door had been shut tightly. Jake was sure he hadn't closed it. He pulled at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Panic set in as he realized he was trapped. Desperate, Jake pounded on the safe door, yelling for help. The footsteps grew louder, and a low, guttural chant echoed through the station. It was as if the walls themselves were alive, pulsating with an unseen force. The flashlight flickered and went out. In the darkness, Jake could hear whispers and see shadowy figures moving around him. The walls seemed to close in, and the chanting grew louder and more frantic. He could feel the oppressive weight of something malevolent pressing down on him. Just as he was about to lose hope, the door to the safe burst open. Jake stumbled out, disoriented and terrified. The gas station was eerily quiet, and the strange figures were gone. The photos and clothes had vanished, and the altar was reduced to a pile of debris. Jake fled the station and never returned. The local legends gained new life after his story spread, and the abandoned gas station became a place of fear and caution for locals and thrill-seekers alike. No one knows what Jake encountered that night, but the station remains a chilling reminder of the unknown horrors that lie hidden in forgotten places.